After losing my parents in an accident and growing up in a foster home, I couldn't find any meaning in life or any reason to keep going. Then one day, I received a notice that I have a letter from my late mother. What's more, it was sent from the address where I used to live with my deceased parents. This kind of thing shouldn't happen. But maybe. After days of confusion, I decided to check the letter that came from my family's old address. But standing in front of my old house, I suddenly felt a wave of mixed emotions. So, I decided to check things out from the backyard. I peeked in quietly and saw a middle-aged couple living there. I strained my eyes to take a closer look. I thought if they were strangers, I'd just sneak away. But the next moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. What? Dad, Mom. Stunned by this unexpected turn of events, I just stood there frozen. I'm Jane Miller. I entered a foster home system when I was 10, and was released from it just 2 years ago. Now, I live alone in a cheap apartment in New York, juggling several part-time jobs. My parents passed away in a car accident when I was 10. We got caught in a pile-up on the highway during a holiday weekend. I don't know if I consider myself lucky. I was in the back seat, and I survived by some miracle. Unfortunately, my parents died when our car crashed into the truck in front. That day was also my birthday, and we were on our way back from a swimming pool I had wanted to visit for so long. I was dozing off when suddenly, it felt like a cannon had hit my back, and in the next moment, I couldn't move. With no sense of time, I desperately called out for my parents. But there was no answer, and I lost consciousness. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. As soon as the nurse realized I was awake, she started rushing around, and soon, police officers and doctors were entering the room one after another. The whole time, I kept wondering when my parents would come. I asked the nurse several times, "Where are my parents?" but her answers were always vague, and I couldn't understand. At 10 years old, I thought, they must be in another hospital. But a few days later, I learned the meaning behind those vague answers. A woman who said she was my mother's sister came and told me that my parents are both gone and they had no chance of survival. She also informed me saying that, I have my own family, and that she couldn't take me in. It was really difficult to understand what was happening at all. But my aunt tried to explain things to me in a way I could understand, despite my confusion. As a result, I realized that after losing my parents, I would be entering the foster home system once I get discharged from the hospital. I had a lot of questions, like what would happen to the house we lived in, or what would happen with school, but I remember the feeling that I will have to become part of a stranger's family. After I recovered from my injuries and could move again, I was sent to the foster home with no chance of going back to our family's old house. My aunt took care of the funeral and sorted through my parents' belongings while I was in the hospital, and she sent my things to the facility. We had been exchanging letters while I was in the hospital, so I knew about these arrangements in advance. To be honest, it felt like strangers were rummaging through our house, and I hated it, but there was nothing I could do about it at 10 years old. On top of that, I thought that I wouldn't be able to go home anymore. Even if I wanted to ask why, I didn't know who to ask or how to express it. Everything was happening without my consent, and I just went along with the flow. Those were the days. Even after I moved into the foster home, I'd still get letters from my aunt a few times a year, but they always say the same thing. "How are you? Is everything okay?" That's all the letters said. At first, I wrote back, but soon I ran out of things to say. So gradually, even when I received a letter, I stopped replying. In the first place, I had never met my aunt while my parents were still alive, so she felt like a stranger to me. I didn't feel anything when a stranger showed concern, and the letters became just a hassle. Maybe she sensed how I felt because her letters gradually became less frequent each year. By the time I was about to be released from the foster system, I had grown so distant that I even forgot the letters existed. I always felt like I was left behind in some unknown world, as I went through my days at the foster home. Maybe because the funeral happened while I was still in the hospital, and I went straight to the foster home without ever going home, nothing ever felt real to me. Why am I even here? That sense without any purpose was always lingering in my heart. As I grew older, that feeling turned into a deep sense of loneliness that stayed with me. I have nothing left. There's no reason to keep trying when there's nothing. And so, I started hating everything and lost all my motivation. That's why, even though I got a job right after leaving the foster home system, I couldn't easily fit in with the people or the workplace, and I quit soon after. I became a part-timer after that, but I never felt like I belonged anywhere, so I never stayed long at any job. The time between finding new jobs kept getting longer, and my already depleting savings quickly ran out. I barely made it through each day by scraping by with temp jobs. Is there really any point in living if it means enduring this kind of loneliness? Wouldn't it be easier to just give up my apartment and live on the streets? I thought that way many times, but I always stopped myself just before going too far. If my parents knew I was living on the streets, they would be heartbroken. Even though I knew I would never see them again, I couldn't bear the thought of making them sad. One day, utterly exhausted from such thoughts, I got a call from the foster system office saying there was a letter for me. Maybe because I felt guilty for quitting my job so quickly, I had been avoiding any contact with them. So, I was planning to just have them throw the letter away without even receiving it. But as soon as I heard who sent the letter, it felt like I've been hit over the head with a hammer. The sender was none other than my late mother, who died in the accident when I was 10. I immediately headed to the office to pick up the letter. Ever since I got the call, I've been at total confusion. My parents died in an accident when I was 10. That's an unchangeable fact. So, miracles don't happen, and the letter must be some sort of mistake. I tried hard to calm myself down, refusing to escape into fantasy. But despite my efforts, an impossible hope kept surfacing. What if my parents are still alive? If my mother is still alive, why would she leave me in the foster home for years? And now, after all this time, what good could a letter do? As I rode the train to the office, I kept thinking about all these things. But I couldn't find any satisfying answers, nor could I sort out my feelings by the time I arrived. My mind was in total confusion, joy, doubt, anger, and sadness, and I felt like I could burst into tears if I let my guard down. By the time I reached the office, after more than an hour, my mind had gone completely blank from overthinking. Let's just see the letter first, then figure it out. I muttered to myself as if to calm down. I walked into the house. I received the letter and stared intently at the writing on the envelope. It was unmistakably my deceased mother's handwriting, and the sender was indeed my mother. Nervously, I opened the envelope, and inside were 3 letters, each decorated with illustrations of the character I loved when I was 10. The first letter began with the words, "To Jane, on her 20th birthday." The soft, slightly quirky handwriting that filled the pages made my chest tighten, and I felt tears welling up just looking at it. The letter was full of memories from when I can remember until I turned 10, and thoughts on how I might grow over the next 10 years. It was like my mother herself was there. I looked up at the ceiling repeatedly, trying not to let my tears soak the letter. But despite my efforts, tears strolled down my face, leaving spots on the letter. After finishing the letter, I thanked the people there and quickly left. My mind was still in such turmoil that I couldn't talk to anyone. On the train ride back, I read the letter over and over again. I felt like if I kept reading it, something would click into place. Eventually, I concluded that this letter must have been written before the accident. At the time, there was a thing of celebrating birthdays for 10-year-olds with letters about what the parents think what their kids would be like in the future. I remembered then that we had a lesson about it at school, and I was really interested in it. My mother had probably written this letter to commemorate my 10th birthday and to share her hopes and thoughts for my future 10 years down the line. The question is, who sent this? The first person who came to mind was my aunt. But we've been out of touch for years, and I don't see why she would go out of her way to send a letter in my mother's name. Besides, the sender's address was the house we lived in when I was 10. If my mother's sister was the sender, she would have used her own name and address. We've been so distant that I doubt she even remembers me much anymore. I tried to think of who else it could be, but no one came to mind. The image of my mother in the letter filled me with both happiness and confusion. What am I supposed to feel? After reading this, what am I supposed to do? No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't come up with an answer. Exhausted from thinking, I decided to put the letter away in a drawer and go back to my usual routine, as if nothing had happened. But the more time passed, the more I couldn't stop thinking about the letter. I even thought about throwing it away, but when I saw my mother's handwriting on the envelope, I knew I could never do that. So, I decided to know and meet the sender of the letter. I had nothing to begin with, so I figured I had nothing left to lose. Maybe I could even ask the sender for some help with my life. Maybe, without realizing it, I was hoping the sender could offer me something to change my current life. On the train ride to the familiar address, I found myself staring blankly at a town that looked nothing like I remembered. The fields and woods had been replaced by large shopping centers and rows of houses. The station where I got off now had a completed bus terminal and even a stylish cafe. Is this another world I don't recognize? I thought as I trudged towards the address on the letter. But a few minutes later, I turned the corner and gasped at the sight before me. It was the same neighborhood, same as when I was 10 years old, almost unchanged, just as I remembered. That sight instantly pulled me out of the dull, colorless world and back into the vibrant world, back to my past. This was undoubtedly the town where I used to live. And just ahead, my family's house was waiting. Before I knew it, I was running towards the house. A strange sense of comfort filled my heart, like that of a child returning home or a lost child who finally found her way back home. And there it was, my beloved home, just as I remembered it. So, the letter really had been sent from my house. But now that I'm in front of the house, I couldn't find the courage to ring the doorbell. My fear of the unknown was stronger than my desire to uncover the truth, and it kept me rooted to the spot. After pondering what to do, I decided to take a look around first and made my way to the backyard. Feeling somewhat uneasy about acting like a thief, I quietly peeked into the garden. There, I saw what appeared to be a middle-aged couple getting ready to sunbathe on the balcony. The man seemed to be in a wheelchair. I continued to observe, trying to determine if I knew them. I could faintly hear their calm conversation, and for a moment, they turned their faces in my direction. The moment I saw their faces, I couldn't help but cry out. What? Dad, Mom. This can't be real. Stunned, I stood frozen as the man in the wheelchair noticed me. Jane. Is that you, Jane? As he murmured my name, he suddenly burst into tears. As for me, I was so shocked that my mind went blank and I couldn't move. The next moment, the woman who had gone inside sensed something was wrong and rushed out to the balcony. She ran straight to the man in the wheelchair and spoke to him. The man, still sobbing, pointed at me and said something to the woman. The woman stared at me intently, then suddenly smiled and said, "You're Jane, right? We have something we'd like to talk to you about. Could you come inside?" With that, she invited me into the house. Although I couldn't fully grasp the situation, I had so many questions I wanted to ask. I nodded silently, then went to the front door and was led to the living room. During the introductions, I learned that the woman's name is Lisa. And the man in the wheelchair was indeed my father, Michael. I also found out that they had gotten married and are now living together in this house. According to Lisa, my father had been in a critical condition after the accident, hovering between life and death. She mentioned that they must have explained this to me when I was 10, but I had no memory of it. When I told Lisa that, she asked, "How was it explained to you?" When she asked, I told her that my mother's sister had said he was in a hopeless condition with no chance of survival. But now that I think about it, I only remember hearing that only my mother died. If that's the case, why did I think my father was dead too? Lisa helped me piece together my memories with the truth, and we spent hours doing it. In the end, I realized I had made a huge mistake in my own mind. After the accident, I couldn't understand that my father was in a coma, and as a 10-year-old, I felt rejected by a father who never came to see me. Dad never came to see me. He must be mad because Mom died when I told them I wanted to go to the swimming pool. That's how I felt at 10, and I thought my father hated me. And somehow, that feeling turned into a memory that both my parents had died in the accident. This is just my guess, but I think it was less painful for 10-year-old Jane to believe both parents were gone than to think her father hated her. Lisa tried to reassure me, but honestly, I just felt guilty towards my father. But at the same time, a question arose in my mind. I was terrified to ask, but I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't. Summoning my courage, I asked Lisa. Why didn't my father come to get me? Lisa paused to think for a moment, then gave my father a gentle glance. My father silently nodded, as if giving a signal, and Lisa began to explain the situation back then. Michael regained consciousness more than 6 months after the accident. That timing coincided with when I was discharged from the hospital. Although Michael miraculously woke up, it took him several more months to fully grasp the situation. To him, it felt like he had just taken a nap, half a year had passed. Additionally, my father was left with many impairments, memory, speech, and physical, due to the after effects of the accident. The doctors even told him it would be impossible to return to his previous life. My mother's sister, who had already been told that recovery was hopeless, went ahead with the arrangements for me to enter the foster home system as planned. By the time I became aware, everything was gone. I painfully realized how much time and what was precious to me had been lost while I was in a coma. As he said this, my father's eyes welled up with tears. According to Lisa, after being discharged, my father was admitted to the disability care facility where she worked. Even though he wanted to see you, Jane, there was a time when he couldn't express himself well enough to communicate it. And as he began to process the loss of Mary, Michael became severely depressed and was even hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for a time. My father, too, having lost everything, went through a period where he struggled to find meaning in life, just like I did. Hearing that story made me feel incredibly relieved, somehow. My father didn't hate it or forgotten me. In fact, he had thought about me so much that it drove him to a breaking point. The moment I realized that, I felt a strange warmth, as if the cold loneliness in my heart was slowly melting away. According to Lisa, even after returning from the psychiatric ward, my father's emotions were still unstable. Not only did he refuse rehabilitation, but he also wouldn't eat, couldn't express himself, and often lashed out at staff or threw things. As a result, the staff began to treat him more and more impersonally. While he was treated like a burden within the facility, Lisa was the only one who faced him without a single grimace. Lisa used homemade cards and a whiteboard to help understand what my father wanted to say and to communicate with him. She also helped him with therapy to prevent his muscles from stiffening and found time to visit him to practice conversation. My father, in response to Lisa's dedication, I felt Mary's presence. I thought that if she saw me in such a pitiful state, she'd be sad, and that made me realize I had to keep trying. As he said this, he held Lisa's hand tightly. It was clear how important Lisa was to my father. I couldn't help but feel a little envious of the two of them. I wished I had someone who could support me like that too. After that, my father threw himself into rehabilitation every day, and he stopped lashing out at the staff completely. The same father who wouldn't even get out of bed when he first arrived now went to the rehab room on his own and even did additional training. Just hearing about it felt like a miracle. But the real miracle was still to come. Thanks to his relentless effort, my father recovered enough to lead a normal life. Amazingly, he was able to leave the disability facility. Even the doctors were shocked and said they'd never seen someone recover this much. My father said this with a bit of pride in his voice. Next to him, Lisa was smiling happily. Her smile was so much like my late mother's that I felt a strange sense of nostalgia and warmth. Speaking of my mother, I hadn't asked about the letter yet. I took the letter from my bag and asked about how it was sent. Suddenly, my father lowered his head and fell silent. Seeing this, Lisa spoke up and explained the story behind the letter on his behalf. After we got married, I was cleaning up the house and happened to find this letter. Michael had always been thinking about you, Jane, but he felt he didn't deserve to see you, so I convinced him that we should at least send the letter. Lisa's explanation finally put the jumbled pieces in my mind together. It was all a twist of fate. My father couldn't come to see me because of the accident and his disabilities. And I mistakenly believed that he was dead. We both felt alone, walking through dark and lonely lives. But this letter from my mother, with Lisa's help, brought my father and me back together. I never once forgot about you, Jane, but for so long, I couldn't do anything for you. I was afraid that if I reached out now, it would just bother you, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I'm so sorry. My father said this with absolute sincerity. After hearing about my father's struggles and suffering, I didn't feel the slightest urge to blame him. On the contrary, I'm genuinely happy to know that he had been thinking of me all this time. On top of that, realizing we both hit rock bottom at the same time made me think, we really are father and daughter, and it almost made me laugh. When I told Lisa and my father about it, they both started laughing through their tears. It was the first time I'd ever seen such warm tears. I glanced out the window and saw the sunset casting its light on the balcony. I stood up and told them, I think it's time for me to go. My father, sounding panicked, immediately tried to stop me. Wait. We finally found each other. I don't want to leave you alone again. I may not have the right to ask this, but I want us to be a family again. Please stay with us, Jane. My father, now crying a different kind of tears, bowed his head and pleaded with me. I was secretly overjoyed to know he cared so much about me, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the fear of disrupting his current happiness with Lisa. The part of me that thought I should decline clashed with the part that wanted to stay and live with him, leaving me paralyzed. I stood there for a while, unable to say anything. Hey, Jane, do you think your mom would have said no? Surprised by the sudden question, I stared intently at Lisa's face. Lisa smiled gently, as if she could see right through my hesitating heart. Not just her smile, but even her gentle, caring nature reminded me so much of my mother. I felt as if my real mother was the one nudging me forward. And that gave me the courage to be honest with my feelings. If you'll have me, please make me part of your family. As soon as I said that, my father's face lit up with so much joy that he almost fell down out of his wheelchair. Seeing him like that made me laugh out loud for the first time in 10 years. I finally came back to a world where I truly belong. It's been 6 months since then. Now, I went back to school to achieve my dream of becoming a flight attendant. I'm also planning to take some special courses to further my self-improvement. Before coming back here, I had lost all motivation and stopped thinking about my dreams and future. But after reuniting with my father and finding the space to think about my future again, my mother's letter once more guided me. The end of that letter read, "What are you doing now? Did you achieve your dream of becoming a flight attendant? Whatever your future holds, I'm cheering for you, Jane." With my mother's kind words in my heart, I decided to push forward towards my dream. And I secretly hope the day would come that I can give Father and Lisa my first paycheck.